Good evening. I almost forgot to take this off, so I got to make sure I get all adjusted here and whatnot. But hello, my name is Andrew Sladky. I am so happy to be here tonight, and I am so glad that you are all here or watching or listening with us tonight as well. So we are in this series right now tackling this enormous question: who is Jesus? And in week 1, Alice was here and taught us that Jesus is God. He is the Son of God, and he is God. And so already we've kind of established that there is mystery in who Jesus is. And then last week, Brooke was here, and she revealed God's character as a miracle worker, as a redeemer, as a transformer, not like the cars that turn into big robots, although I'm sure he could do that if he wanted to, but kind of like that. He can transform all kinds of things, right? And he makes one thing that looks one way into a whole completely a new thing in another way. And he's going to do that in the story that we're going to read tonight too. But we've established that there are these patterns of Jesus changing one thing into something new. And we also learned last week from Brooke that it's okay to ask really hard questions in our faith. And we're going to do that tonight as well. And so this week, I want us to explore a new piece to this big question, because oftentimes there is a gap between what we know about Jesus, that he is good and redeemer, and miracle worker and life giver, and then actually our life experience. There's sometimes this gap. Maybe on one hand you believe or you have heard that God can do anything, and on the other hand, there is something in your life right now that God will not do or has not done that you've seen him do for someone else. Maybe you've heard stories of God at work in people's lives. We share those kinds of stories all the time around here, how he's maybe helped someone in overcoming an addiction, and yet you still are struggling with something like that. Or maybe a story of God helping somebody fill some sort of an emptiness or a loneliness that they feel, and you have prayed and pleaded, and you still feel alone. Or maybe you've read or heard stories in the Bible or in real life of Jesus like healing the sick, and yet you just buried a loved one. If God was really all powerful, then he could have shown up, right? Before it was too late. He could have done something. Why would a good God allow a bad thing to happen? And this is a hard question. It's a question that oftentimes, when we get to it, causes us to maybe even retreat from exploring the question itself. Causes a lot of people to lose their faith, or maybe not even explore their faith to begin with. So what do we do with that question? And what does the answer to that question say about who Jesus is? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And we're going to do it through the story of a man named Lazarus. So if you brought a Bible, or if you have an app on your phone, or if you grabbed a Bible, I encourage you to pull it out. We're going to have the scripture on the screen here as well. And if you have a pen, all the better, because there's going to be all kinds of things that you can circle or underline or make note of. But we're going to be in the book of John as we're continuing to work through this book, and we're going to be in chapter 11. And we'll just jump right in. So, starting in verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. And this is referencing another story. In fact, Jesus actually spent a lot of time with these people and went to their house and hung out, and he was friends with them. So in verse 3, so the sisters sent word to Jesus. He wasn't with them at the time. They sent word to Jesus and said, "Lord, the one you love is sick." And when he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Okay, we've got a lot already. What we've established so far is that Jesus has a dear, close friend named Lazarus, who he loves. And he finds out from his sisters, or from Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, that Lazarus is sick. And Jesus at the time, we know because of where he was just at in the previous chapter, but he's about a day's walk away from where they're at. So there's a little bit of traveling that would be involved. And Jesus declares at the end of this that this sickness will not end in death. I also just want to point out, I'm going to make some side notes, I think, as we go here, because this is just a rich story, and there's so much that's good about it. But I just want to point out that the message that was sent, "Lord, the one you love is sick," does not mention a name, just the one you love. And Jesus knows who it is. And also there is no specific request, as if it's just enough that Jesus knows, and he'll know what to do with it. So just something to keep in mind. If there's something on your mind, just like you don't even have to have a specific thing to ask. You can, but you can also just bring something to Jesus, and he'll just know what to do with it. So then the story gets interesting. We're going to continue on in verse 5. He says, or the scripture says, "Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he called an Uber and had them take him straight to the hospital." Why are you guys laughing? Uber wasn't around at the time. Okay, so that's not what it says. But wouldn't it make sense that Jesus finds out that these people that he so loves, that this friend of his is sick, so he would just rush straight to him? That would make sense to me. That's not what it says. Here's what it actually says, if we can change to the next slide. It says, "Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, so when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days." What? He loved them, so he waited? What does that even mean? It doesn't really make that much sense. And it sure doesn't make sense to a reader of this story, maybe for the first time especially. Like, why would he wait if somebody that he loves is sick? And Jesus, we know, we have seen him. Brooke just told us a story last week about how he healed a blind man. We know that he can heal and has the power to do that. So why is he waiting? Because he loved them, he waited. So we're going to keep exploring that. We're going to skip ahead just a few verses to verse 11. And it says in verse 11, he went on to tell them, or his disciples is who he's talking to at this point, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, then he'll get better." Because, if you sleep, it's got, maybe the fever will break or something like that. Jesus had actually been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought that he meant natural sleep. And I'm sure that his disciples were used to this by now at this point. Like, okay, you're saying one thing, you're kind of meaning another thing. Can you just say what you mean and mean what you say? And so actually in the next verse, Jesus goes on to say, "Then he told them plainly, Lazarus is, in fact, dead." Wait a minute. You just told us 2 days ago that this was not going to end in death. And then we waited around for 2 days. And now you're telling us that he is dead. And then Jesus actually says something that's sort of off-putting. It could even come off as downright just insensitive to Mary and Martha, whose brother just died. But it's so incredibly important for us. In verse 15, he says, "And for your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." So Jesus has told his friends that Lazarus died. They waited too long. And then he says, "I'm glad I wasn't there to heal him." Who says something like that? I mean, we're talking about who is Jesus, and right now, I feel like people might have every right to be angry or confused or disappointed in Jesus. And then he says, basically, because I'm glad, because you're about to be given new grounds for believing. So he's done all of these signs and wonders throughout his ministry on earth, and now he's saying, listen, I'm going to give you something new grounds for believing in me. Spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you the end of the story. Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead at the end of the story. We're going to get there, and I'm so sorry if you hate spoilers, but I have to tell you this. I have to tell you this because it is so important for the way that we read the rest of the story. So Jesus knows what's going to happen in the end, right? And then there's kind of this to me, weird little verse that comes up next, and it sort of shows that there can be some sort of humor. Maybe it's not meant to be funny, but in the Bible, verse 16 says, "Then Thomas, one of the people that was with him, one of his friends, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, 'Well, let us also go there, that we may die with him.'" Just like this, almost could be read as like a valiant, like, let's just go. And in the previous chapter, Jesus was almost stoned to death. So now they have to travel back through that place. He's probably kind of like, Lazarus is dead, Jesus is gonna die. We're probably gonna die too. Let's just go. And so it's sort of this little pause that was humorous to me. But the next verse 17, they did arrive safely, in fact. And it says, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. It's likely that Lazarus actually died when the messenger that originally had come wasn't even back yet. This has some significance, this 4 days thing, because Jewish tradition at the time taught that the soul actually sort of hovers around the dead body for about 3 days before it finally leaves on the fourth day. And although this isn't really something that's like taught in the Bible, the significance here is that if this is actually what people believed at the time, Jesus made sure that he waited until the fourth day because he was about to do something incredible. So he needed to make sure that people actually knew that Lazarus was dead before he did what he was about to do. So we continue in verse 18. Now, Bethany, the village of Bethany, was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had actually come to Mary and Martha to comfort them in the loss of their brother. And when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet Jesus, but Mary stayed at home. And John is he writes so intricately. There's so many little details here, and I just want us to be aware of where people are at. Mary has stayed at home. Jesus is just outside the village. Martha is going out to meet Jesus. And when she gets there, in verse 21, she talks to Jesus. And it says, "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died." No, they're friends, right? No hug, no, it's so good to see you, thanks for being... Right out from the very beginning, she just says, if you'd been here, my brother would not be dead right now. She's angry and sad and upset and hurt and probably feeling all kinds of emotions. Now, I want us to notice here that even in her sorrow and her pain and her loss, Martha still addresses Jesus as Lord, indicating that just because he didn't show up, she hasn't stopped believing that he could have saved her brother. Her circumstance didn't change the fact that she still believed that Jesus was the Son of God, which actually probably gives her even more grounds for being angry with him, because she knows he could have done something if he had been there. This story continues, and we see more of Martha's faith in Jesus anyway. In verse 22, she says, "But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask." And Jesus replies to her, "Your brother will rise again." Then Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." I know. It's like she's saying, I know my theology, okay? I get it. On the last day, he'll rise again. But that's not really where I'm at right now, and that's not really what I need to hear right now, because I'm grieving. And what I actually wanted was to know that you were going to be here sooner so we didn't have to wait for a last day. And then Jesus says something that literally changes everything. Jesus replies to her and says, "I am the resurrection and the life." I am the resurrection and the life. Martha says, "I know he'll rise in the last day." And Jesus says, "That's now. In fact, that's me." He continues by saying, "The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die." Do you believe this? This shows a little bit about Jesus' character, because he's not just up here on some pedestal just preaching at somebody. He's having a conversation. Do you believe this? This first part of this set is basically kind of like your body is going to die, but it'll be risen again someday. And then the second part is kind of like, if you believe in me and you live that way, your spirit actually is never going to die. Do you believe this? Just like Jesus had said Lazarus wouldn't die, but then he did, he's like now saying you will die, but you won't. Mystery. So she replies back to him. She says, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." And after she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. So she went back to the house where Mary was, called her aside and said, "The teacher is here, and he's asking for you." Which, by the way, I just want to pause here too, because there's so much in this story. By the way, when we don't choose to go out to Jesus and meet him and stand up to him and tell him how we feel, when we don't choose to go to Jesus in our anger or our disappointment or our pain, and when our interaction doesn't look like faithful Martha's, he still asks for us, and he still invites us. I know for me, in my, pain, or when I'm hurting, oftentimes my first thing isn't like to go straight to Jesus. That is just the truth. Oftentimes I think I can control something, or I can fix something, or I can do something. I don't know if anybody can resonate with that. But just know that Jesus is still inviting you in. So, verse 29. When Mary heard this, she got up. We're talking about a story about somebody being raised from the dead. She got up, she rose up quickly and went to him. Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. Okay, now Jesus invites us and calls us, but then he kind of doesn't come all the way in too far until we invite him in too, right? So there's just all of this really cool location stuff that I just love in this story. And it's my interpretation of it, but I just think it's so cool. And when the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, so she's got all these people with her comforting her, they noticed how quickly she got up and went out. They followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to mourn there. I want to point out here, too, that when we move toward Jesus, other people see that and they move with us. They might not even know where we're going, and they're following and they're watching. So verse 32, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, and now, by the way, there's a crowd of people around. And remember that Jesus is about to give new grounds to people for believing. So we've got a crowd that's watching. When she got there, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus knows where he's at, but he still asks. He wants people to bring him along, invite him toward the thing that is darkness or death or whatever that is. So "come and see, Lord," they replied. And then, two simple words reveal an incredible amount about who Jesus is. We're learning a lot about who Jesus is in this story, and this is just a whole new level that we've never seen before. Verse 35 says, Jesus wept. Remember at the beginning of the story, Jesus said, this is not going to end in death. In fact, he even said he was glad he wasn't there to heal Lazarus because raising him from the dead would be new grounds for people's belief in who he was. Jesus knows what's going to happen. And he actually has every reason to want to just jump ahead to the end and say, wait. Don't be sad. Why are you crying? Just wait. Just stop. Because it's going to be so good. Just wait and see what I'm about to do. But he doesn't. Instead, he sits with Mary. It doesn't say he sits, but I just imagine she's down here weeping and he just sits with Mary and with all these friends of Lazarus who are deeply saddened by his death, and he weeps and he grieves and he mourns. He mourns the fact that we are living in a world where we are almost certain that death is the end. So, who is Jesus? Oh, he's a lot of things. But something that I see here is that Jesus is our friend. He wants us to be honest with him, right? Mary and Martha both expressed their extreme disappointment to him. And this is so important because Jesus wants us to come to him even in our anger. Have you ever been angry with God or what the heck? I think I've been learning all this stuff about you and then this, and now I don't even get it. I don't know what that is for you, and maybe it actually has been a death of a loved one. And I also we just had this Storms series right before this series, and I want to clarify something because I've had some people ask this question, or even maybe say the sentiment of I don't have a storm because I've never lost a loved one. Listen, if you have ever moved out of your parents' house and gone on to do something else, you've been through some sort of storm because that is hard. There's change of seasons. That can be hard. There's a loss of a friendship or a relationship. That can be hard. It's not just only physical death. There is death of a dream. I wanted to do this in my life, and now something has happened, and it will not ever look that way ever again. There's fear. There's fear of what's to come. We don't even know what's to come, right? So, I say all of this stuff because Jesus wants us to come to him in all of those moments. And so here we have this beautiful picture. The enormous God of the entire universe, right? The creator of all things. The author of the beginning and the middle and the end. He knows it all. He knows it all. And he doesn't just say, just wait till the end, you'll see. This huge, enormous God is a human friend who instead just weeps with us. He didn't even say anything at all. He just weeps. It's incredible. If you have any bit of skepticism in you about who Jesus is, and I know that I often do when I ask these kinds of questions, you might say, that's amazing. Jesus is a friend who weeps in our pain. However, why even get to the point where we're weeping at all? If this could have been prevented, why even get here? And if you're asking that question, you are absolutely not alone. In fact, the next few verses address that next thing. So verse 36, if you're following along, then the Jews said, look, see how he loved his friend. But some of them said, couldn't he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? This is skepticism. This is questioning. This is okay to do, by the way. This is still faith. They still believe that he opened the eyes of the blind man, and yet they're kind of like, but he couldn't conquer this. Here we are again. We had Martha and Mary, and now this crowd of people over and over and over again are saying, what the heck? If you could have done something, why didn't you? We've been asking this question the whole story, right? And so is everybody else in the story, and I promise that we're going to get there, but we have to see how this thing ends first. So we're almost to the end. In verse 38, it says, Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. And it was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. Again, he could totally move that stone if he wanted to. But he's invited somebody to let him in. But Lord, said Martha, faithful Martha, by the way, but Lord, the sister of the dead man. By this time, well, you see, there's kind of this bad odor, because he's been there for 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And then Jesus looked up, and in this beautiful moment, he spoke to his Father. Because remember, he is God, but he's also the Son of God. And so he has this conversation with his Father. He looks up and says, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I've said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe you sent me. So Jesus has this conversation with his Father, basically saying, you and I, we are so closely connected. And we know that. But I want everybody else here and in the future for generations to come, I want everybody else to know that too. So that when I do what I'm about to do, all of the questions that these people have get answered in me. Verse 43, when he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped in strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And you can just imagine this crowd of people, probably just frozen, like, what did we just witness? So Jesus kind of says, hey, go on. Take off the grave clothes and let him go. Let him be free from death itself. Incredible. I told you guys at the end of this story, and it's still, I've read this story so many times over the last week, and it's still incredible. But why wait? I think that there was something about Jesus' character. There was something about his character that he knew they would not see if he showed up at the sickbed. He had to show up at the tomb. Jesus needed, at this point in time, after all of his other works and miracles and ministry here on earth, at this point in time, Jesus was ready and needed to show them his power in a way they had never seen before. And they had seen him healing, but Jesus did not just come to heal. They had seen him doing all of these things. And although they are amazing and wonderful and still a part of who Jesus is, he came for something more. We're often disappointed when Jesus doesn't show up in our thing or our circumstance when we've expected him to. And in this case, I think what I'm learning is that Jesus showed up at exactly the point in time where he knew the biggest impact would come. Not necessarily at the time he was asked to be there. There's a lot of things that people say about why bad things happen and how to kind of explain that if there's this good God. I do not believe that God causes bad things to happen. I don't believe that at all. God is good. He is so good and he loves us so much. And your pain is not caused by him. We live in a dark and broken world. It's part of our mission at Basic, right? Blessing a broken world. Jesus does not cause bad things to happen. And I don't necessarily believe that he intentionally lets something bad happen at random, just to test us. You know, when somebody says, well, God won't give you something more than you can handle. It's like, I just think John is pretty clear in this story that that's not really why Jesus did what he did. Right? This story could have been about Jesus raising any old person back to life in front of anybody or whatever. It's very specifically told. And John was very clear to remind us that this was a person who Jesus loved deeply. They were friends. So this wasn't easy for Jesus to just let happen either. It troubled him. He was deeply moved to the point of weeping. I just don't think that he waited and didn't show up just to test Mary and Martha so that next time this kind of thing came around, they would be a little bit stronger. I just don't think that's what this story is saying. Here's why I think he waited. He waited because people they didn't need to see another miracle that he could do. They needed to see who he was. Life itself. Life himself. He is. He is the resurrection and the life. The truth is, though, we will not always know why Jesus doesn't show up when we want him to. I'm sure that you could go back in your life, or maybe it's right now in your life, and name a point where you're like, if only that prayer had been answered. And maybe you can go back and say, actually, that prayer was answered just kind of in a different way, and it's actually sort of better that it worked out that way. Maybe you can't. We won't always know why Jesus doesn't show up when we want him to. Mary and Martha and the disciples and all of those people, the crowd, they all doubted him all the way up until the moment that they saw this man who they knew to be dead walk out of a grave he had been in for 4 days. But the hope is this. The hope is this. Someday, we will be able to look back and understand. And maybe that will be tomorrow for you, or next week. And maybe it will be on our very last day on earth, or the day after. And while we don't always understand why Jesus doesn't meet our expectations now, we can have hope that as hard and as painful as this life can be in this broken world, he has overcome the very thing that we repeatedly mistake as final: death. Kind of like Martha, this isn't always the thing that we need to hear if we're grieving or if we've experienced deep loss or pain. So here's the bonus. In the meantime, while we don't understand everything, in our mess, in the decay and the smelly and the gross and the disappointment and the anger and the sorrow, we can know that he is with us. And he is weeping right alongside of you. And on your best days, he's laughing with you too. Jesus knows the end of the story. In fact, he is the end of the story. And he's also the beginning. He is the resurrection, and he is the life. And in the meantime, he is also our friend. Jesus is the end of the story, and this story does not end in death. So we're smack dab in the middle of a 3-week series trying to answer this really tough question about who Jesus is, and we have 2 more weeks left. This is an incredible miracle. I would say that this is the most incredible miracle that Jesus ever performed, aside from what's about to happen next. There are some people who don't believe he is who he says he is, or there are some people who believe he is who he says he is, and they're afraid that it's going to change things as they know them, and they want him dead. And so Q's going to be back next week, and Kurt's going to be back after that. We've got 2 more weeks, and we're just going to keep exploring this question. But the deal is here, he is the resurrection and the life, and we get to see that in and through his own personal experience next. So let's pray, and then we're going to sing some songs, some music together, declaring who he is and responding to him. So pray with me. Jesus, thank you for who you are. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for being our hope. Thank you for being life. Thank you for coming to this broken earth as a huge God to care about us so deeply. God, we hurt. personally and just in our world. God, I don't believe that you caused a pandemic. I don't believe that you cause a lot of the issues that are going on in our world. There's so much darkness. We are angry sometimes about it. We don't understand. We want to understand. Help us understand, but we don't understand. But thank you. Thank you for this promise. Thank you for revealing something new about who you are to us so that we can live and walk in hope. Thank you for being our friend. Thank you for being with us here. Thank you for being with us here. Thank you for weeping with us, God. God, we're so excited to meet you. We're so excited for the day when we look back and we realize, it's better this way. Help us look forward to that. And in the meantime, continue to show us the ways that you are with us. We love you so much. Amen.
I'm going to invite you guys to stand and sing with us. This first song that we're going to sing, it might be new to some of you. It's actually a very old song, and maybe you will remember it. And it's okay if you don't find yourself singing along in the beginning. Maybe just close your eyes and listen to the words, or as we sing, I invite you to join in. Please hold. I actually had not a nightmare, but a vision that something like this would happen in this moment. But Jesus meets us here. He's laughing with us. Perhaps just a chance to take a deep breath. What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All Take it to the Lord in prayer. Are we weak and heavy laden, numbered with a load of care? Precious Savior, still our refuge. Take it to the Lord in prayer. Do thy friends despise, forsake thee? Take it to the Lord in prayer. In his arms he'll take and shield thee. Thou wilt find a solace there. What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. That's the song that Jesus has used over the last year of my life. Anytime I felt alone or afraid, that line, oh, what peace we often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer. I just love and believe what Andrew said about Jesus doesn't want us to wait until we've got it all figured out, and I'm the type of person that can't handle when somebody's like, well, it's gonna be okay. Like I'm the one who needs to weep, and I have a feeling I'm not the only one in this room tonight. And Jesus is a friend who weeps with us, and something crazy happens when we sing to God, when we worship him, when we turn our eyes from our troubles, not because we need to stuff them down or ignore them, but when we bring our troubles to the Lord and we turn our eyes up to him to worship him, something changes in us. And so as we declare these words tonight, we're going to sing 2 more songs. I know we're going a little late, and if you got to go, you got to go, but we're going to sing 2 more songs that talk about who God is. And if you can just turn your eyes towards him and worship him, I believe that he will give you peace tonight.
And if we could, in the booth, just change the setting for the lyrics, then I will sing the right words here together.
The lyric view, but they're just very, very small. You guys thought we had all these songs memorized. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. Say, you are here,
stop working. You never stop, you never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working.
Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. 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 You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. One more time. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Yes, it is. I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade, they're never enough. And then you came along, and you put me back together. And every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Sing it out. Oh, there's nothing that's better than you, Lord. There's nothing that's better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Sing, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you see them all, and you still conquer it. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Lord, there's nothing that's better than you. Oh, there's nothing that's better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Sing that again. Lord, there's nothing that's better than you. Oh, there's nothing that's better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. Hey. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves, come on. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. Lord, there's nothing that's better than you. Oh, there's nothing that's better than you. Lord, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Oh, sing it again. Lord, there's nothing that's better than you. Oh, there's nothing that's better than you. Lord, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. All right, you turn graves into gardens. Let's pump it out. Come on. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You turn graves, one more time. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can.
Thank you, Brad and Kate, my friends. It's good to have you back. Thank you, Andrew, for an incredible teaching. Jesus is our friend, right? We learned that tonight. That's pretty important. Maybe that's the first time you've heard that or believed that. Jesus weeps with you. Jesus weeps with you. Bring whatever you got to Jesus. He's there waiting with you. And the most important news in all of the history of the world, Jesus makes dead things alive things. And maybe you're not going to see it today or the next day. Maybe you're like Mary and Martha, and it's down the road. It's the now and not yet. But I believe, and the reason we even gather in this room, is that one day everything will be restored to life because of Jesus. Because Jesus did what he said he was going to do. He is the resurrection, and he is the life. So thanks be to God for that.